Hi, welcome to Infusion Health, the podcast. I'm comedian Chris Patrick, a.k.a. Self-Proclaimed Power Man. And I'm here with my co-host and significant other, Rach.
Hey, guys.
Now, today, once again, we have Reverend Lyle. We've talked about Judaism. We've talked about, let's see, what other religions have we talked about, Rach?
Zoroastrianism? Yep,
Zoroastrian.
The one that you were having problems with.
Okay, yeah, we talked about that. And we've also talked about, what other religions?
Buddhism.
Yep. Now, today, like I said, we got Reverend Lyle here, and today we're going to talk about paganism. Now, you may think some people have called them witches and stuff like that, but you'd be very surprised that a lot of our traditions, especially Christmas, come from actual pagan rituals. So we're going to talk about paganism, and without further ado, I'm going to bring him on. Reverend Lyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yep.
So today we're talking about paganism. Now I know now is paganism before Christianity? Is it after Christianity or
both?
Both.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So and like I said, one of the actual Christmas actually comes from a pagan holiday.
And Easter.
Yep.
And I'm not sure, but
many traditions
yeah,
are linked to paganism, and it was a way for Christians to say, this is what you celebrate, this is very similar to what we celebrate, and they would usually celebrate them around the same time so that it would be easier for the paganists to come over to the new religion.
Okay. So Reverend Lyle, tell us more about the starter or whatever of paganism.
Okay, so paganism, and I'm so glad that Rach, you decided to want to talk about this, because paganism really is beyond the scope of what we normally think about religion or spirituality.
Well, some people think they're witches, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and there are witches. I mean, there are covens and so on, but
Wiccan.
But the paganism that we know now is fairly modern. So there's a few things about paganism I wanted to mention, which will help kind of enlighten us a little bit on some of its history and its traditions. So there's no sacred text, okay, and there's no written history. So they go back to folklore, the worshiping of nature, and of astronomical signs like Stonehenge and Angkor Wat are astronomical landmarks. Okay. So it really it's before and during and after all these other religions.
Sure.
Okay, but fast forward today, paganism is actually growing again. It's actually
very much growing, and I was actually again. And the kids and me were talking about this, and they have started getting interested in this, and I asked them why. And it's because all these new movies are coming out, and it's like enlightening people to what the truth was, right? And we're such at a time right now in our culture that we want to know that truth, right? We don't want to know the truth in the LGBTQ. We want to know the truth in Black history. We want to know the truth in religion. We're finding out these absolute truths. You know, no more are we being blocked by society saying, no, you don't listen to that. Our ancestors are not telling us, no, we can't listen to this. You know, and we have technology and books and all this so that we can search this out. But one thing that I wanted to talk to you real quick, Wiccan was Wicca was often referred to as an evil source, and it's not. So where there is witchery there, it's not thought of as I'm going to do evil things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it really, so there's two aspects of paganism, which is polytheism. So there's many gods and goddesses. So we go back to the Roman, the Greek, Native American, a lot of the older European cultures, they had gods and goddesses. Okay. So, and then also there's animism, which is worship based on nature or natural ways. So, so there's both the idea of gods and goddesses, like Zeus and other gods like that, or simply native, like nature, animals, things like that. Yeah. So
Mother Nature, Father Time, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think the best way to describe it to the newcomers is it's a more nature way of thinking.
Right. Yeah.
These different pagan religions you can all kind of tie in together, that they're more into how to celebrate Earth.
Right. Yep. And I'm glad you brought that up. So actually, in some of the research I was doing, they posed the question: is paganism really a religion? And they said basically not by the criteria that we've followed on other religions. So it's more of a spirituality than a religion. And then they talked, there's no sacred texts, there's no written history, there's no agreed upon rituals in all of the different walks of paganism. So each one has its own folklore, its own rituals, traditions, names, and stuff like that. So it's actually really hard to define. But what they did find was there were words like spiritual or other words that would deal with like nature, prayer, meditation, chanting, things like that. So, but religion itself, an idea of church were not existent. Temple, not anywhere in the histories. So
you say there's no written text, but my question is since there's no written text and they don't call that religion, how do they call Scientology a religion?
That's a future program, I think. Yeah. So, and that's a very good question, actually. So, yeah, we should have that as a
forward thinking.
Forward thinking, yeah. So, but for paganism, and actually, it's interesting because some of the research I did, they talked about how a lot of the Proto-Europeans had the Celts and so on. They had these traditions. And then the Greeks, they said they went into these Greek areas and they introduced their gods and goddesses. So you had not only the Celtic tradition, but also the Greek tradition. And for a while, there was this idea of them being equal too. Right. So, like Apollo and these other gods. Well, and also, and that's how paganism got its name. So the idea of pagan actually was like a country dweller or a civilian, because the idea that people in the city were more like soldiers, right? So they had, or kind of that culture, like in Rome and Greece. So the idea was it was the folklore or the country people were the pagans. So, and then when Christianity suddenly rose from the Roman Empire in 470 AD and even up to that, they took on a lot of the pagan traditions as well, much like the Greeks and the Romans did. And then they side by side, and then they just assimilated some of their traditions to make it more palatable for Christianity to spread that. So, yeah.
So paganism could be close to Christianity?
Yeah. There's,
Well, like I was saying, the ties to them were very similar. So they would say, like your sister's getting married, and how that ritual is celebrated versus how it's celebrating Christianity. They would tie that. They would tie different religions, holidays, traditions, that kind of thing. One thing that is very similar that I can think of is in Native American culture, they would send a man out on a quest right around the same time that you get your bar mitzvah.
Right. Yeah. The vision quest.
Well, you mentioned marriage, and I know the white dress means purity, means she's supposed to be a virgin, so it's white means purity, then there's the something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue.
Right.
Does that come from paganism or?
Well, actually, a lot of our wedding rituals actually come from the 1800s and the 1900s. So actually, Queen Victoria was the first one to wear a white dress.
Yep.
Okay.
So there was a lot, and flowers only because they did not take showers very often. So you needed real flowers to cover the smell of body odor. So yeah, a lot of these have just over time they were just practical things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, like I said, with paganism, one a lot of people don't understand this, but Christmas actually came from a pagan ritual.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to go over. I thought this was interesting. So we have some of the eight festivals during the wheel of the year. So, and a lot of us will recognize these. So Samhain, traditionally celebrated on October 31st,
Halloween.
Halloween, All Hallows Eve.
Oh, yep.
Yule, the winter solstice. So Yule log, things like that we have in their modern society is pagan. Imbolc, which is happening right now, is the traditionally celebrated on or near February 1st. So Imbolc is like the sitting in the belly. It's the welcoming of spring starting to happen, right? And then Ostara with the spring equinox, and Ostara, that's how we get Easter. That's why we have bunnies and eggs, which are the sign of fertility.
And for that religion, it's Esther, you know.
Yeah.
And they would say, well, your goddess Esther is celebrating fertility, just like, the Easter bunny and that kind of thing. So they kind of grabbed onto that.
Yeah. And then Beltane, traditionally celebrated around May 1st. So the maypole, a lot of the British or the English cultures would celebrate the idea of the Druids in England area. So, and then just to finish out Litha, which is summer solstice, and this one I always have a hard time talking about here, Lughnasadh, which is traditionally celebrated around August 1st, and then Mabon, which is the fall equinox. So all these 8 traditions, the wheel of life and paganism, we have adapted in Christianity or modern culture. And actually, truly, how a lot of the modern paganism started was in the Romantic period in the 1800s. I don't want to say rebellion, but the pushback from the industrialization that was happening in the 1800s, there was a whole romantic movement back to nature. So Emerson, Thoreau, all these other people, and poets and other artists were going back to nature. So there was a neo-paganism rising out of those times of the Romantic period in the 1800s. So, yeah.
And then Emerson, of course, we know as a poet, philosopher. And then Thoreau was poet, philosopher.
Yeah. He wanted to go out into the woods, and he lived out there in the nature near a pond and wrote. So definitely want to maybe check out some Thoreau. Yeah. So, but you see a lot of the paintings in the 1800s were about nature. So there was this whole pushback away from industrialization, going back to nature. That's where a lot of the neo-pagan movement really rose.
Sure.
So, yeah.
When you're talking about this, it kind of makes me think, if Christianity was trying to go more into industrial, how would you try to convince somebody that they're wrong and you're right? Well, religion is always a hot topic, the even yoke and all that. And from myself, going back to that time, if I was there, one of these Christian people, I'd say, well, your pagan religions are very similar to this. We can always, teaching more of our religion, and then we could teach our other ideas to start moving this mission forward.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, but they had no one authority. So each country, each area of a country, each band had their own idea or celebrating rituals. So really, so this one's very interesting because it's not a religion per se.
Right.
It's more of, you would say, like a movement or a spirituality. And even, for example, even in Europe, Northern Europe versus Southern Europe or Eastern or Western, they had their different traditions. So there was no one authority or one textbook or one idea of dogma. So those just didn't exist. So, and for those of us who come from a Christian background, we are used to structure and order, right? And it doesn't exist. So it's really hard to talk about because there isn't any of that in that. So,
Well, and like you said, there's no written text,
But I think even without having written texts, originally the Bible was not put on paper for many, many, many centuries.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's just forward thinking. How do you teach my daughter or son what they need to do as far as religion and like holidays and all this goes forward, you know, and all these, as a child, I grew up Catholic, right? And just having these fond memories of what Christmas was, right? I didn't have a written text when I was 5 years old.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So again, yeah, and that's a good point. That Catholicism is rich in ritual and symbol, and a lot of those came from pagan traditions, which is neither good nor bad. It just is. But we can really take a lot from that. Right. And so having grown up Catholic myself, looking at the stained glass window, the colors represented certain things, numbers represented certain things, and the figures represented certain things. So there's a whole story in the stained glass. Right. For those that were illiterate, they could learn by looking at the stained glass.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So what other things, like you said, you have the holidays like Easter and stuff like that. What things do they do? Do they do for like Easter or whatever the holiday is you call it?
Well, I think they get together, they celebrate ritual in the culture that they are from. They celebrate ritual, and a lot of it's around food as well, which also is very common for human nature anyway. But yeah, so rituals and then food, celebration, dance, music, chanting, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Which is very similar to almost any religion out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, going forward, you know, now you're in the new times, 2020s, and I think like I was saying earlier, I think the movie is really, you know, on top of our pandemic that we've went through. We want to get more natural, you know, and these movies are teaching us things that, you know, well, Ragnarok, right? Thor, who are these people, right?
Yeah.
So you start going into the history books and really finding out who these god and goddesses are. And then you're looking at more of how to help your body with more natural things, how to start appreciating the earth when you're seeing climate change and all these other fun things going on, like really fun, you know, and I think it's important for us to, you know, embrace that in our child because we're giving them the movies that they're watching.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, to piggyback off that too, one thing that I find interesting is that just because you're pagan does not mean that you're liberal or Democrat or that off the chart on that left side. So pagans could be any political party. They could have a lot of different backgrounds. So they're really hard to define that way too. So for example, there might be some pagans who are very forward thinking and more into Mother Earth, Gaia, right? And therefore really concerned about climate change and vegetarianism and things like that, and actually pushing for the principle that the earth is a living being. And they worship that earth. It's like a goddess earth. And there's a relationship to earth. So taking care of Mother Earth and protecting the land and the water, et cetera. So they might be very politically active in taking care of water rights, air rights, land rights, things like that. And then also exploring issues around climate change. Sure. You think about the whole green movement since like the 60s and 70s is part of the whole, I don't want to say it's part of the pagan movement itself, but it matched really well with the idea of neo-paganism as a way of respecting Mother Earth.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, it kind of reminds me of when Siddhartha, who later became Buddha, sat under the tree and he tried to get tempted with all this stuff, and he put his hand out and he touched the earth and he said, I am one with earth, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very similar to when Jesus climbed, you know, the mountain and had his 40 days of purifying himself.
Yeah. The 40 days fasting and sitting there in prayer. Yeah. So, yeah. So there's a lot to paganism that is so rich and so diverse. And even though there's no text per se or specific rituals or cultures to it, and people are still exploring how they express that, it's neither good nor bad. It is, and there's a lot of good to it. So there's an idea too between what is good and what is evil in paganism.
Yeah.
So there's really no such thing as evil per se, because there's no person of Satan. There's no that sense of a dark god or goddess. So that way too, there's life. There's better choices and good choices and not so good choices. So yeah.
But there is Ares and there is Zeus, and they can be thought of as harsh people, not evil, because there are stories of them having a genuine heart.
Right. Yeah.
But they're not the. I mean, if you're going to go dark, you can go there.
Right.
But it's not entirely dark if you know the true stories.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good distinction with that. So, yeah.
And so, I mean, goddess of, death, but the thing is that, even in our own, thought of what death is, the stature of who death is. There's even stories these days. There was one story that I remember that death gave this person a day to live.
Yeah.
So it's even in that moment, it's giving, a heart to death.
Right. Yeah. And with neo-paganism, that whole idea that we are part, this is one of the aspects I found very interesting, is part of that whole animism is that we as humans and nature are one. So even the universe, the cosmos, and Earth and us are one. Mm-hmm. So that matches with a lot of the metaphysical movement that happened in the 1800s and going forward, that we're all interconnected. And that also matches well with Native American spirituality as well. So I'm going to throw out some big words with this. But pantheism or panentheism, pagans are very comfortable with pantheism, which is this God is in nature and in us. It's all the same energy. Panentheism, where it's like there's this energy in us and nature, and then even beyond that, that's panentheism, and they're comfortable with that.
So why do you think there's such a rebirth in paganism now with young people, exploring it or getting into it?
Well, I think it's an anti-establishment kind of movement. I don't want to say anti, but it's moving beyond establishment, moving beyond dogma, authority, and the willingness or curiosity to explore. And again, it came out of the Romanticism of the 1800s. So that has gone on actually since the 1800s. Yeah. So, yeah.
Renaissance here. That's huge, but, and like I said earlier, the movies, but I think it's awesome more than that. I think a lot of people, even with health scares, are finding out that the more natural that you go with your food, the healthier you're going to be. Right. These overprocessed foods. And it kind of opens to, well, grandma used to do that, and what did grandma celebrate, and that kind of thing. So it opens up a whole new world to even people that are in their 40s and beyond what a child is listening to. And then I think it's also important that it's recognized that we are starting to hear truths in the LGBT community. That, Black rights movement and all these other things, these truths, and how much darkness was really over people. One thing that is kind of superficial for myself, I loved Victoria's Secret. And to know all these truths about Victoria's Secret is just absolutely dark.
Yes.
Bill Cosby was thought of as a superhero forever, and then his truth came out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also I think too, with just this movement away from an established culture. So we saw it as early as like Star Wars, even before Star Wars, where these heroes and myths and exploration of space and things. So a lot of that was also pagan in some of its nature. So we've just seen that continue to build. So magic, The Hobbit, our
Yes.
Tolkien's books, right? And all these other, and science fiction authors. So a lot of these authors too have this element of paganism in them that have been
Narnia.
Narnia. Yeah,
Narnia is
yeah.
a great example of both of them.
Yeah. So it's hidden, but it's in plain sight at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you mentioned Tolkien, because I remember watching the Lord of the Rings movies, especially the second one, and I said, okay, the trees are fighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I said, there's this stuff that I said, and I was looking at him like, okay, wait, I think this kind of represents, Nazism, and the trees fighting, that represents nature. Then you got the hobbits, and you got I said, this kind of, and then I was lucky because one night I got home late and there was a documentary on Tolkien, and they said that he grew his childhood home got blew up by the Nazis, by the Germans, and a lot of the stuff where he grew up, a lot of land and stuff got demolished from the war. And I said, okay, yeah, that's what the trees, with the trees fighting, nature fighting against, fighting against the oppressor, or destroying the land, because all this stuff can come together,
Yeah, and so just as an invitation to people, the idea of myths and storytelling are so important in so many different traditions, but in paganism, myths are really important, and gods and goddesses, the journeys with them, the relationships with them, stories and ritual are very, very important. Although there's no text that says you do this, you do this, you do this.
Right.
There's that exploration of myth and storytelling. That's very valid, and I think we see that in the movies and literature, and so I think we'll just see that continue to grow. Actually,
well, I think one of the things is too, with, like Rachel was talking about the food. I think one of the things, and I kind of say the good thing with the pandemic was, the thing with the pandemic is that mothers and fathers were home and they were actually having to cook, and then they were cooking, and they're like, "What have I been feeding my kids?" And then to me, and I don't know if anybody else saw, but I just saw a big rise in natural foods. People going to the store and buying natural foods and buying,
Well, for a short time there, a lot of restaurants were closed or on the fear of closing.
Yeah.
So then what do you feed your child?
Yeah. And I saw a lot of, because I do most of the cooking in the house. And I noticed that a lot of stuff was gone. I'm like, what happened to this? What happened to this? And people were starting to go, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can feed them instead of feeding them the frozen processed stuff that they've been eating for years,
Right. Yep. Yeah. So I want to mention something too. For those that are interested, there's a community here in the Twin Cities, and they have a celebration called the Paganism every March. And so I just wanted to let people know that it's March 17th to the 19th in Plymouth, Minnesota at the Crown Plaza Hotel. It's right off of Highway 55 and 494. So you can go to the Paganism, PAGANICON, and then .org. And you should get more information about if you want to go and attend.
I'll definitely put the link in the show notes also. So.
Yeah, and I went a few years ago, and I went to a talk on ethics. Okay. I was very interested in what I thought. There's this pagan community going to be having a talk on ethics. I thought they don't have an ethics per se. So what? Right. And actually, I was very, very impressed. They were talking about the same kind of ethics, the professional ethics that I, as a chaplain, would have as far as their own leaders in their communities. The same laws, the ways of being, and stuff like that. So I was really impressed by that, and I thanked the woman who was giving the talk. But yeah, it's something really worth checking out.
Well, yeah, especially on ethics. That sounds interesting. Yeah,
it was. I was like, cool. You and I are reading the same book.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I think we've come into an end.
Yeah, Reverend Lyles, again, great to be here. It's always good conversations. And like I said, we start these conversations. Sometimes we could just go for hours, but if you want to get in touch with Reverend Lyle, Rachel will have that in the show notes.
I will always have his stuff in the show notes.
And then once again, too, if you are practicing or are
interested,
or you do any, or you're into any of these religions, and you say, hey, wait, I need to talk about you. We are welcome. We're putting out an open invitation for you to come on the show and talk about, your specifics or what you know about a certain religion, or something we didn't touch on. Please correct us if we are wrong. And I'm going to let Rach close us out.
You guys, we've come to an end. I want to thank you all for joining us, and open your mind and open your heart to all religions. Have a great one.
Take it easy.
I know.